The morning light in the slums of London was not bright. It did not pour in through glass panes or fall on polished floors. Instead, it seeped weakly through cracks in the boards, filtered through the mist and the smoke that hung over the city like a permanent shroud. Imagine yourself waking there. The first thing you notice is the damp. Always the damp. The walls glisten faintly, moisture seeping between the bricks. The air smells faintly of coal dust and old cabbage. Somewhere above, a neighbor's baby cries. Somewhere below, a man coughs, deep and rattling, as if his lungs are lined with soot. The room is small, smaller than you might expect, perhaps 10 feet by 8, shared by an entire family. A single mattress on the floor, stuffed with straw, a chipped basin in the corner for washing, though water must be fetched from the communal pump in the courtyard. Step outside and you'll hear the city before you see it. The rhythmic clang of horseshoes against cobblestones. The distant hiss of steam from the river. Vendors calling, boots splashing in puddles. The slum lives by sound, by movement. Always awake even before dawn. Now, picture the narrow alleyways that twist and turn between leaning buildings. They are dark even at noon. Children play barefoot in the mud, their laughter mixing with the sharp calls of street hawkers selling bread, onions and coal by the handful. This is the East End, home to tens of thousands. Dock workers, washerwomen, matchgirls, costermongers, and chimney sweeps. Their lives were measured not in comfort, but in endurance. The morning routine: a woman rises before the sun, tying a rag around her hair. She lights a small fire. Coal if she can afford it, wood scraps if not. The smoke fills the room before it escapes through the chimney, coating everything in a thin layer of black. She boils a pot of water and adds what she can. Perhaps tea leaves used twice already, perhaps just a crust of bread to soften. The children stir, rubbing their eyes. One will go to the factory, another to sell matches on the street. The smallest, too young to work, will stay behind in the dim room until their mother returns. The rhythm of their lives is unbroken, familiar and heavy with repetition. Yet in that rhythm, there is a strange kind of peace, a steadiness that carries them through each grey morning. The labour of the day, step into the streets again, follow the boys with soot. The blackened faces as they head toward the chimneys. They climb into dark shafts barely wider than their shoulders, scraping away soot that clings to the walls like ink. Others march toward the match factory. The rows of girls, young and thin, their hands stained yellow by phosphorus. They laugh softly as they work, but the laughter fades quickly into coughs. The air inside is sharp and chemical. The hours long. Further down the street, men unload coal from barges at the docks. Their backs bend under the weight, the muscles straining in rhythm. Shovel, lift, heave, repeat. Even in exhaustion, there is a kind of unity. The slum is full of motion, full of sound. Not the hum of machines, but the slow human pulse of labor. The streets themselves. The ground beneath your feet is slick, a mixture of rainwater, soot, and refuse. Rats dart between piles of waste, bold and unafraid. Yet even here among decay, there is life. A resilience that defies despair. You might pass a street musician, playing a fiddle with missing strings, or a flower seller, her basket bright with blooms from Covent Garden, her hands red from the cold. Each figure moves through the fog like part of a great, endless painting. Grey and gold, harsh and strangely beautiful. Evening descends by nightfall. The slum changes tone. The noise softens. Lamps glow weakly through the haze. The smell of coal thickens, mingled now with the faint sweetness of roasting chestnuts from a street stall. Families gather again in their small rooms. They talk quietly, their words almost lost beneath the crackle of the fire. A few share stories, not of heroes or kings, but of neighbors, of lost jobs, of fleeting luck. Outside, the city hums. The factories continue to turn. The river still flows thick and dark, but within these walls, time seems to slow, and as the fog deepens, you can almost hear it. The steady breathing of thousands at rest, a city of the weary drifting toward uneasy dreams. This was life in a Victorian slum, unrelenting, damp and dimly lit, yet somehow alive with endurance. For in these narrow streets, among those who had least, London's true heart continued to beat. And among those who walked these streets, one young boy saw more than just survival. He would turn the greyness of poverty into words that shone light into dark corners of society. Let us follow him next. The boy who saw it all. In the same city of fog and soot, where the air seemed to hum with the sound of endless work, a boy once walked with ink-stained fingers and wandering eyes. His name was Charles Dickens, and long before he became a household name, long before the printed pages carried his voice into drawing rooms and parlours across England, he was simply a child, wandering through London's shadowed heart. Imagine him now, a small figure, thin and thoughtful, with a coat too big for his shoulders and a gaze that misses nothing. The year is around 1824. The Industrial Revolution is roaring. London's population has swelled beyond imagination, and yet, for the poor, life remains a long, slow battle against hunger and despair. Charles walks alone through the maze of streets, his boots worn thin. He knows the smell of the river, that heavy, oily scent mixed with the faint sharpness of sewage. He knows the sound of carts rattling past, and the cries of hawkers selling oranges by candlelight. He knows, too, the feeling of being invisible, the factory years. His father, John Dickens, once a cheerful clerk with high hopes, had fallen into debt. Debtor's prison awaited. The Marshalsea, a place both real and symbolic of England's deep divide between prosperity and poverty. While his father and family lived behind those barred walls, young Charles was sent to work. He found himself in a small, dim warehouse by the Thames, Warren's blacking factory, where he spent his days pasting labels on bottles of shoe polish. The air was thick with the smell of vinegar and glue. The floor was damp. The light, weak and grey, filtered through grime-covered windows. For 12 hours a day, he stood among other boys, their hands raw, their voices low. The rhythm of the work was mechanical, the hours unending. And yet, within him, something stirred, a quiet, observing mind that never ceased to notice. He watched the faces around him, tired, resigned, yet sometimes bright with humour. He listened to the speech of the street, the cadence of London's working poor, words rough-edged, but full of life. That rhythm would stay with him forever. At night, he walked home alone to his lodgings, a boarding house by Hungerford Stairs, near the river. The Thames rolled black and slow beside him, carrying away the refuse of the city. The water whispered against the banks, a restless sound that echoed the restlessness in his young heart. He was 12 years old, the awakening of the observer years later, when he wrote of children alone in the city, of little Oliver crying out for more, of poor Joe sweeping the streets in Bleak House. He was remembering that loneliness. He had seen it. The dirt beneath the fine boots, the hunger behind the cheerful songs of street performers. He had felt what it meant to be forgotten. Yet Dickens was not broken by it. The experience became the quiet forge of his imagination. From it he learned to weave compassion into storytelling, to turn observation into empathy, and empathy into words. Imagine him, years later, seated by candlelight at a writing desk. The fire burns low. Outside, the fog presses gently against the glass. He dips his pen into ink and begins to write. Not quickly, not feverishly, but steadily, as if each word is drawn up from the deep wells of memory. The streets were narrow and unpaved, the houses dirty and decaying. The words flow, calm and deliberate, bringing life to those the world had chosen not to see. A city reflected in ink through Dickens. Victorian London began to see itself, its contradictions, its cruelty, its strange beauty. He wrote of the ragged children and the greedy merchants, of the rich who turned away and the poor who kept walking, step by slow step. His novels became mirrors, reflecting both the soot and the soul of the city. And yet, despite his fame, Dickens never fully escaped the shadow of those early years. He walked often at night through the same alleys he had known as a boy, sometimes for hours, wandering without destination, letting the city speak to him in whispers. He said that London was like a companion, one that he both loved and feared. Imagine him now, older, coat collar turned up against the chill. The gas lamps flicker, the streets glisten after rain. He passes by the blacking factory, long since closed. Perhaps he pauses, just for a moment, and listens. The echoes of labour, of his own small footsteps long ago, still linger in the stillness. The legacy of compassion. What Dickens gave to the world was not only his words, but a new way of seeing. He taught the comfortable to look down, not in pity, but in recognition. To understand that progress built upon misery was a fragile triumph indeed. His characters, Oliver, Tiny Tim, Nancy and Joe, became voices for those who had none. And through them, Parliament debated reforms, charities were founded, and children were, at last, seen. His pen became a quiet instrument of change, not through anger, but through gentle persistence. And so, the boy who once pasted labels in silence became the man who gave a voice to millions. London itself was his great story. Every street, every shadow, every sigh. Soft pause, but even Dickens could not capture every mystery that lay beneath that city of smoke. For beneath the cobblestones, and within its forgotten corners, London hid other secrets, relics of death and devotion, stories that lingered in the earth itself. Let us move now, carefully, quietly, into the strange and somber world of corpse roads and ghost hospitals, where history and restlessness intertwine. Night in Victorian London had a peculiar stillness. The city never truly slept, but after the last factory whistle faded and the final carriages clattered away, the fog seemed to reclaim the street, soft, pale, and all-encompassing. Under its cover, the boundaries of life and death blurred. In this city of progress and invention, the past was never far away. It lived beneath the cobblestones, beneath the gaslight, beneath the very foundations on which London stood. Imagine walking through it now. Your steps are muffled by the mist. The air smells faintly of wet stone and coal smoke. The gas lamps stretch away into the haze, each glowing faintly like a captured ember. Somewhere nearby, unseen but always felt, the river breathed, slow, broad, and dark. And beneath your feet, unseen as well, lies a hidden network of history. Burial grounds, plague pits, forgotten chapels, and narrow paths that once served a strange and solemn purpose. The corpse roads. The path of the dead. Long before the Victorians built their great cemeteries at Highgate, Kensal Green, and Brompton, London's dead were carried through the city by hand. From parish to parish, along ancient routes that wound through alleys, markets and fields. These paths were known as corpse roads. Quiet, functional routes by which bodies were borne from overcrowded parishes to distant resting places. In time, the city grew around them. Houses rose where open fields once lay. Shops and taverns lined the paths, and the roads themselves became just another part of the living landscape. Yet, the memory of their purpose lingered. People said the air along those routes was colder, that the ground, when dug, revealed bones tangled among the roots. And in truth, there was reason for such stories. For London had buried and reburied its dead, for centuries, layer upon layer, plague victims, paupers, soldiers, and saints. When the railways came, their tunnels sometimes cut straight through forgotten graveyards. Workers, digging foundations for tracks and stations, unearthed skulls, rosaries, fragments of coffins. Calmly, methodically, the city built over its own past. The cemeteries of progress. By the 1830s, the problem had grown impossible to ignore. London's population had exploded, and so too had its dead. Churchyards were overflowing. Gravediggers stacked coffins upon coffins, sometimes only inches below the surface. In the summer heat, the ground itself seemed to exhale. And so, reformers began to speak of a new idea. Great garden cemeteries on the outskirts of the city, peaceful, orderly, and filled with air and light. Highgate Cemetery became the most famous. Imagine it as it once was, newly planted trees, winding paths, marble angels gleaming pale in the morning mist. It was both a place of mourning and of leisure, a garden of the dead, where the living strolled on Sundays, reading epitaphs as if they were chapters in a book of human stories. Still, not everyone could rest in such peace. For the poor, burial remained a hurried affair. Paupers' graves held many bodies at once, nameless and unmarked. In death, as in life, class drew its sharp dividing line. Yet, even in these inequalities, there was a strange unity. For all, rich and poor alike, returned to the same damp earth beneath the same grey sky. Ghost hospitals and the quiet care of the dying, alongside the graveyards and corpse roads, stood another kind of institution, the hospital. To the Victorians, hospitals were not merely places of healing, They were thresholds, between sickness and recovery, between life and the end. The great brick buildings rose above the slums like fortresses of mercy. Inside, corridors echoed with the slow shuffle of nurses' shoes, the quiet hum of whispered prayers, the clink of glass medicine bottles. The smell was unmistakable: carbolic acid, soap, and candle wax. Patients lay beneath crisp white sheets, the world outside forgotten. For many, this was their final resting place before the cemetery. And so, the Victorians developed a fascination with death that bordered on reverence. They built morgues beside hospitals, dead houses as they were called, where the bodies of the unclaimed lay in quiet order. Doctors studied them, artists sketched them, and writers pondered their stillness. In this, there was both science and superstition, a belief that understanding death might somehow bring meaning to life. Even as medical progress surged, as anesthesia and antiseptics reshaped the world of healing, the city remained full of quiet corners where the past refused to fade. Some said the hospitals themselves held ghosts, not of vengeance or fear, but of gentle persistence. Spirits unwilling to leave the places where they had suffered and been comforted. The archaeology beneath the streets in the centuries that followed. As London rebuilt itself again and again, the earth continued to reveal what it remembered. During the expansion of the underground, engineers unearthed entire burial grounds beneath railway lines. Beneath Liverpool Street Station, archaeologists found the skeletons of plague victims, long lost to memory. Each discovery was handled with reverence, bones brushed clean, recorded, and reburied. It was as if the city itself were whispering, "Remember me. I was once alive." Even today, construction crews occasionally pause when digging deep foundations in the older districts. They find coffin nails, fragments of wood, the faint curve of a jawbone. The city's pulse slows for a moment, acknowledging those who still lie below. The comfort of memory. There is a strange comfort in this awareness, that every step we take in London treads lightly upon centuries of lives once lived. But the city's great beauty was built not only by those who survived, but also by those who quietly faded into its soil. For the Victorians, death was not hidden away. It was part of daily life, spoken of in parlours, pictured in portraits, even woven into jewellery. Mourning itself became an art. Black crape, silver lockets, letters tied in ribbon. Grief, for them, was not an interruption of life, but a rhythm within it. And perhaps, in this acceptance, there was peace. Soft pause. Allow the listener to breathe. Now, as the fog lifts and the morning light returns, we leave behind the city's forgotten dead. We turn our gaze upward, toward the glittering windows of another world entirely, the one reserved for the fortunate few. A place of comfort and quiet power, where the air smells not of coal, but of cigars and polished wood. Let us step softly now into the hush of a Victorian gentleman's club, the final refuge of privilege amid the city's endless hum. It is evening again in the great city. The fog that clings to the river has begun to thin, curling softly around the lampposts. The shops are shuttered now. The market cries long faded, and only the steady clip of carriage wheels disturbs the calm. If you follow those carriages westward away from the cramped lanes of the East End, the city begins to change. The air feels different here, cleaner, lighter, faintly scented with horse oil and cigar smoke. Street after street of grand townhouses stretch before you, their facades pale and orderly, the windows glowing with gaslight like small, contained suns. Here stands St. James's Street, lined with places that seem to hum with quiet self-importance. The gentlemen's clubs of Victorian London, crossing the threshold. Imagine yourself at the doorway of one such club. A heavy oak door swings open on polished brass hinges, revealing warmth and a faint haze of tobacco. Inside, the light is soft, filtered through amber glass lamps, and the flicker of a great fire that burns steadily in the hearth. You step forward onto thick carpets that hush every sound. The air is dense with the scent of leather, pipe smoke, and varnished wood. Around you, men sit in deep armchairs, half hidden behind newspapers and glasses of port. They speak rarely, and when they do, their voices are low and unhurried, like the slow ticking of the clock that dominates the far wall. This is a world built upon stillness, where the chaos of the city outside is kept at bay, and time itself seems reluctant to move. The rituals of the evening, a waiter, dressed in immaculate black and white, moves quietly among the chairs. He refills a glass here, adjusts a lamp there. The men nod in thanks, scarcely looking up. At one table, a game of whist unfolds with deliberate precision. Each card placed neatly, the rules unspoken but understood. At another, two parliamentarians murmur about the latest bill debated in the Commons, their sentences punctuated by the soft tap of ash into silver trays. There is no laughter, no loud conversation, only the gentle rhythm of conversation, the crackle of firewood, the occasional turning of a newspaper page. In this world, restraint is a kind of language, the walls are lined with portraits. Long rows of solemn faces, each framed in gold leaf. They watch in silence as generations of men come and go, their own painted eyes reflecting the glow of the firelight. Symbols of privilege. Everything here speaks of belonging, but only for those invited. Membership in such clubs was a mark of class, education, and quiet power. Politicians, bankers, scholars, explorers, all gathered here beneath ceilings etched with smoke from 100 winters. It was in these rooms that policies were quietly agreed upon, fortunes discussed, reputations made or preserved. Not through open debate or declaration, but through the calm, subtle exchange of nods and phrases. In one corner, perhaps, a traveller recently returned from India shares a subdued account of his voyage. In another, a writer discusses a serialized story soon to appear in print. They speak not to impress, but simply to affirm their place within the order of things. A circle defined not by need, but by comfort. Outside, the carriages still rattle along the stones. The poor still work, sleep, and dream. But in here, the world feels smaller, contained within velvet drapes and quiet laughter. The architecture of calm, let your gaze drift upward. The ceilings rise high and curved, carved with intricate plasterwork. A chandelier sways ever so slightly from the heat of the fire. Books line an adjoining library, their spines glinting with gold titles, volumes on law, empire, history, and the classics. Beyond the library lies a smoking room, where cigar smoke coils lazily toward the ceiling, tracing invisible patterns in the air. A globe stands beside a window, marked with the territories of an empire that at this hour sleeps under distant stars. For the men in this room, the world feels vast yet steady, a place they believe they understand and command. Yet, even here, beneath the quiet grandeur, there is an unspoken awareness that the city beyond these doors is restless and changing. That progress, the very force that filled their coffers, also stirs in the alleys of the poor. The night deepens. As the hour grows late, conversation dwindles to murmurs. The fire burns lower, glowing softly within the grate. One by one the men rise, adjusting waistcoats, finishing their drinks, murmuring brief farewells. A servant opens the heavy door, and the chill night air drifts in once more. Outside, the fog has returned. The lamps gleam faintly, their halos trembling in the damp. The sound of carriage wheels fades into the distance, and for a brief moment the city feels still again, as if holding its breath. Within the empty club, only the clock continues its steady, patient ticking. Its rhythm echoes through the silence, unhurried, eternal. And beyond those walls, the vast organism of London continues to breathe. Millions asleep or awake, dreaming or labouring, all part of the same slow pulse that drives the city forward. Soft pause, almost a whisper, from the slums to the salons, from the corpse roads to the candlelit clubs. The city holds all lives within its wide, smoky embrace, each life a flicker in the fog, brief, bright, and endlessly human.